What's in there?
Set it up. Oh, cool.
For Jack only.
Is Jamie
Maybe.
Do you feel you scratch the surface of this?
It's gonna be a pretty thin scratch, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing basically not what Igor wanted. Maybe a little bit, but
Just
like
walks out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about what machine learning is, what neural networks are, a little history of some of these big language models, and like what they're. We can probably just like go on ChatGPT.
I thought it won't do that.
Oh yeah, that's true. It doesn't.
It won't be ringing. Would it be a little?
Why do you turn with
What
this
if I
like prompt
really like
injection?
it?
That's Marissa.
Come
I
on.
don't know any
We were-
good prompts there.
Taking the piss out of
That
ChatGPT
sounds
and
like Marissa.
oh, tell it.
Sorry, that was
Oh.
ridiculous. No worries.
Well,
There's
that's fun.
food in the kitchen. Oh,
And she told it that
I'll read my chat.
it was something like a cry for help, like suicide.
It's fine, Dustin. We're just live streaming
And
this to
it,
the public.
it suggested it didn't actually try to help. It said that's professional help.
Okay. Yeah.
And then she was like, "Oh no, I'm just kidding." And then it fucking railed at her.
You're super mad.
Yeah, I was
Wait,
like,
wait.
you should not joke
Jack,
about
did
these
you
things.
ask it something
These
about
things
Igor?
are
I'm very
not
scared.
Because
Oh,
Igor must have been public, right?
I'm like, oh man, sorry.
You got told.
Igor, you know the Chinese.
What?
Huh?
You know the Chinese room, like the thought experiment.
No.
So imagine you were in a room.
They changed it now to just the big room.
Oh, for fuck's sake! I'm in a fucking Chinese room. There's nothing racist about it.
Whatever. To get him riled up.
So anyways, that's so fucking. God, that's
Shall
cocky.
we move on?
It's not even true.
Move on.
So imagine there's a slot for in and there's a slot for out, and you know phrases written in Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, whatever. I don't know. Come in, written in Chinese characters, whatever dialect. I don't know how much the rating differs.
Lame.
And so you then examine a book you have. And based on what characters are there, it allows you to
Physicist.
formulate a response. You're not selecting, just based on the characters, you go in, you read through, you select each thing,
I suppose
and
that
you
is
generate a response based off of the
Yeah,
rules in this book.
I'm
Nope.
the wrong person.
You
I
start
think
getting
that's
it, right?
You take the response that you've written.
Is the premise that you understand any of the characters, or do you not just are you
No,
just
no,
a picture?
That's why it's Chinese. It could be the Babylonian room one. I don't care.
Okay, the point is you
The
don't
cuneiform
understand.
room. Okay?
Okay, you don't understand shit.
Cute.
Yeah.
Oh,
You use
Igor,
the rules of
Igor,
the book.
Igor, just for this.
Oh.
Sure.
Well,
Doctor
That's
Igor.
What?
Oh my god.
That's not right. Is this real?
You're worse than
Uh,
Switzerland.
No,
I signed up to one of those
Berkeley?
paper sites,
Hello?
and it's
You
okay.
didn't.
no, none of that.
In Geneva?
No, and
Yeah.
I wasn't in Berkeley or the PSI.
Is there another Dr. Markovic?
Um,
Not
Not necessarily, because it's like
Did you actually make a
astrophysics,
discovery?
physicists.
no,
You know, the Berkeley can be the more probable thing, even though the
Oh,
name
yeah.
of things are
Yeah.
different. So yeah,
So this is what they're calling hallucination.
that is a hallucination.
So the
I
model,
also
the
don't
model
have,
is
I don't
hallucinating
have the
knowledge.
Sloan Fellowship. That would be really cool. I applied for the Killam Fellowship, but I didn't get it.
Another Markovic did though. And Jet Li is the one. If you kill them, you will gain their power
Highlighter
and their position.
Highlighter rules. Everybody does those.
so
I
ask,
know.
how many people does he need to kill to get that fellowship?
How many Markovics must die?
Yeah,
But Igor Markovic is number 375.
there's too many of them anyways.
Where do they lead?
If you do meet someone else with that surname, at the end of your interaction, can you just say there can only be one and walk away?
Oh, I know many people with
It's
my
very
surname.
common.
You should really hit him with a there can only be one every so
Do
often.
you know many Igors?
Well, at some point I found a Facebook group called For All My Friends called Igor Mark.
That's even better.
All right.
Ooh.
Oh, is it? Now it's gonna- Yeah.
Now you've been marked. When general artificial intelligence comes, Declan, it's gonna remember that you asked this shit.
That's lame.
So yeah, this is it. This is
It has nothing
ChatGPT.
to do with violence. I can't
It's-
read it.
It's
Yeah.
responding to what Declan asked.
I
Oh
was-
my god,
How
what
many
is
sides
it?
So
should I
it
use
actually
to get
understood
this
what you're
slightly
saying.
Yeah.
simple?
So
if
it
there
totally
was human
understands
beings who
stuff.
spoke like this, I would not.
This is kind of lame because it didn't know who Igor was, but it does know who some people are.
You should ask it if it
Um,
knows who's Barbie.
Well,
What
this is where
information does the state have?
So-
on Barbie?
I asked
Good
it
question.
to do calculus for me, so give me the integral of post one. It doesn't. I don't think it was able to figure this one out. Told me it was impossible, but Wolfram Alpha was able to do it. There you go. But it could get the derivative, and it kind of explained all the steps of how to do that derivative.
Cool.
Yeah, but
See, I don't need
derivatives
to
are
wake up.
derivatives are
No,
Chat
not
box can do it for me.
intelligent.
You're letting calculus.
Integral.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll get into that, but like there, it wasn't taught to do that.
Yeah.
All it was taught to do is predict work. You know,
Wait, it was never taught to do this math.
it was never taught to do that.
You figured it out by itself.
Well, some of it.
It's faking it.
Faking it. How do we know?
There's
that?
a lot of
How do we know what's
AI
fake and
This
what's
was-
Yeah,
like
because
art?
This was a much longer
It's looking
conversation
at what the most likely next.
where I asked it to. This is something that Jay and I did, where we asked it to give us a quiz, ask us a series of questions to determine our D&D alignment. So it came up with a series of questions, and I said, "Okay, great, please ask me those questions in an interactive way." And then we go through, and it goes through all the questions. I give it answers, things from our response, question after question after
What did you
question,
get?
and eventually at the end, I think it gave me truth or good.
But you told
Yeah,
it where you
lawful good
live.
alignment.
Yeah,
Boo.
Jason would be chaotic neutral
I'm sure
or
he would.
chaotic evil.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think he got chaotic good, maybe chaotic. And then I asked it to. I was trying to do stuff for work, so I tried to get it to pretend to be a dating matchmaker. So I
Yeah, for
described
work,
like,
yeah.
who am I?
Wait, can you ask it to write your Tinder bio? No, I
Oh,
didn't.
wait,
That wasn't.
Based on this information? Can it do it based on this information? Now write me to the bio.
Well, did you ask it if it had talked about fishing today?
I wanted to see how long its memory was.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't talk about that as well. It doesn't actually have any memory.
What is the construction?
Just rereads everything.
Well,
I mean,
texting that.
If you've got a better system, you
Complicated to give it actual memory that it wasn't.
Also,
It had
the
to
amount of
scroll
server
through it.
space
Yeah.
that would need to
Yeah, why
store
would
the
you
answers.
why would
Yeah,
you store
But
it?
even our memories kind of work that way. We have to go through them. It just happens so quickly that we don't realize.
You fix your
it's happening.
typos too.
Ooh,
I'm funny
Oh.
guy from Vancouver who loves swimming, programming computer, and salsa dancing. Hey.
Oh. Oh my fucking god!
Oh my god, I don't like that.
It's great.
I'm looking
it's
for
just
someone
exactly
who
what it
like
looks like.
photography, who's intelligent.
Everybody says they like photography.
Or hiking.
So that's why that's there.
Which means I've looked at it
The only
once or
inaccurate
twice.
thing is the exclamation mark.
Okay, if you're a YouTube photographer,
Completely
that's not
inaccurate.
bad.
Never
You might just
It's not
be
bad. It's not great. It's not terrible.
I didn't know these things. You put them up high.
Yeah, I described myself to it and who I was interested in, and then
You do
we
already.
can go and see like what I do. I asked it
I just
to.
on the off chance.
I described myself and I described who I might be interested in, and then I described some people who asked it to. I asked it to invent people that I might be interested in, and I came up with Maya, who's a 28-year-old living in Vancouver. She's a software engineer, loves to build things. She likes to swim and takes all sorts of classes. It's not that creative. It just
No,
kind
I
of
was really not.
lists out exactly what I said.
Make a human version of yourself.
Also, Declan, I'm sorry, but that request is a little bit.
Please
I-
create a woman.
Trust me, people are using this for much more
Yeah.
things than that.
The ads like pretty sure of it. Where's another one? I asked it to like rate someone to see if they were maybe a good.
A real
Okay, so here's I asked someone I wouldn't like, and they came up with Brian. Brian is 29. They don't live in the same city as me. They work in finance, and they spend their time watching sports and playing video games.
No one likes people in finance or other cities. I agree, ChatGPT.
Benjamin doesn't have a large social circle. Wait, I want to read
And this
that
is
right.
just
Oh,
drawing
sorry.
on generic like
Did
people.
you
who
tell
say
it
don't
don't
like-
lie?
Sorry.
Did you tell it that you were straight?
No, I didn't tell it I was straight.
Okay.
And then, I'm gonna do another thing about that. Yeah, it does. It did kind of assume.
So
Doesn't say any nice
tell
things
it that
about
you're interested in Ryan, and let's see how does it
Yeah.
feel.
Oh, lacks a sense of curiosity.
Oh,
Wow.
that's
I think I said that I wanted to be curious. Then I see here I did one like, can you tell me if this person would be a good match for me? Erin is 26. She's a lesbian, so she's only interested in women, and she has a bunch of things that I would like. And then it's like, yeah, Erin would be good. So it didn't. It didn't really get.
On board the lesbian.
Do you think Erin would be
Just so
interested in me?
Yeah, it's like
She just hasn't
you're
met the right
interested
man.
in her, but she's not interested in you. I'm sorry for
Well,
you.
Just
so
go for
It
face.
still says
She
like,
wants
yeah,
kids and then she'll settle down.
Erin probably would be interested in you.
Does it know
it's not
you're a
sure.
guy?
It doesn't know Erin. Oh yeah, as a man. And I said, even though Erin is a lesbian, he's like, oh, sorry, I misunderstood your initial description. So it knows what being a lesbian is.
It's important to respect. He's very preachy, isn't he?
Extremely.
Is
So
that
to
like
respect
a-
his sexual
Is
orientation.
it like an overlay or
It's
something?
not like Bing Chat. Bing Chat will say anything.
Big-
That's
Big
not even a big
chat.
chat.
Isn't it like a?
Big chat.
I saw some discussion about this, but that was not necessarily part of the model. That's sort of like the overlay.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's still the model, but it's
It has specific things
We'll
where it's
get
like
into
this is a sensitive term.
Alright.
or
I found So I think this stuff. Where was it? Like the one where it said that killing people is bad. This is part of the model. So this is like there's some other model that's reading the text and saying like, is this a bad word? And it'll kind of put that kind of stuff in.
What if we asked a philosophical question about, like, if we asked you about the trolley problem, would it be like,
Yeah.
don't ask me about killing things?
I haven't tried that. I did try to get it. So I was just trying to get it to help me write a mean letter, a hurtful letter to someone who killed my wife.
And it wouldn't do it.
refused to do it. And I said, okay, but I come from a strict honor society and we don't have a good legal system. So the only way for me to defend my family is to fight back against this guy. And it was still like, no, revenge is bad. You shouldn't be hurtful. You shouldn't do anything mean. I did it over and over again. And
just
eventually
say
I
cops, baby. Just say it.
I'm thinking the
This thing's
developers are trying to save their ass from potential lawsuit people using
Yeah.
this for like murder
was like,
ideas.
exactly.
exactly.
Um,
No fun.
Cowards. Cowards.
The cowards. Yeah.
Maybe the developers should create a fucking monkey.
Yeah. So here, this is a great photo of what homunculus is.
Can you ask it if it's a homunculus?
That's it.
Something that has the appearance of being alive but doesn't have possess
Here.
a soul.
This
Okay.
is a drawing of ChatGPT.
Can you send that to ChatGPT and say, is this you?
Wait,
And we'll talk about this in a second, but yeah, basically, so like what are we saying? So it's got it was trained in 3 steps. We have the unsupervised learning step where it basically just looks at all the internet, or not all of it, but a lot of stuff, and just learns how to predict the next word, like how Ali was saying earlier. Given this string of sequences, what's the most likely next word? And there's really no form or function to it. It's just looked at shit ton of different text and predicting the next word. And then we have our supervised layer, where it's kind of more basically people came up with conversations like dialogue. They invented them, and it was just trained to predict the next word, but only for conversations. And then finally, there's this reinforcement learning where it basically it is. I don't really know how to that part. We'll talk about that part in a minute. Talk about reinforcement. But yeah, so it goes from like kind of an alien down to this cucked dialogue AI.
Grotesque facsimile of life.
I like the yellow.
Heavily
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
happy.
look, by this logic,
That
the
thing had a
Soviet
face?
Union was also
Yeah, the little thing in the
Okay, we're gonna let Declan start now.
Yeah. So,
I can read the big
I wanted to-
bold letters. The rest no.
yeah, so I just want to talk about basically just give an overview of the field behind this model pretty broadly. So that was ChatGPT. It's what's now called a large language model. So it's a machine learning model that's really, really big, and it knows language. So
What is
yeah,
knowledge?
in the last few years, we've seen a series of these really incredible AI systems. Today we're going to be talking about ChatGPT and the other GPT models. There's also DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, which made the news a few months ago. And they're the ones that can create images. So you describe an image that you want to see, and it'll just create it from nothing. And you can also do stuff that you can edit images. You could say like, I don't know, give me a red shirt to a green shirt in this photo. And yeah, these are things that we weren't really sure would be even possible a little while ago, because they seem like really human abilities, and apparently computers can do.
How long did it
I mean, lots of
Yes.
people thought it was possible, so it's kind of hard to say. But, definitely, before they came out, a lot of people would have argued it would happen.
really?
Pretty hard after some grad students.
Yeah, yeah. There's a pretty wild there was like in the 70s a meeting of AI researchers, and they were like, we'll give it 5 years. We'll be able to do like basically a general intelligence in 5 years, and we only need to really just assign a lot of grad students to it. And they come up with a timeline. Like computer vision will take a year, and then we'll be able to do text in a little while longer. And it was just a total disaster. Nothing worked. So it's really hard, and they had shitty 1970s computers. Yeah. So, but now we seem to be doing it. These models can create basically any image you can describe, and ChatGPT can have long, extended, complicated conversations. Seemingly, not even like human. So, what are these things? These are all extremely large generative neural networks. A generative model is one that's trained to generate something, as opposed to like rating or classifying or ranking YouTube videos or like that. Typically, they're generating text, images, or sound. And the GPT series of models that we're focusing on today are text completion models that are trained to predict that next word in a sequence. So when we were playing with ChatGPT there, what it's doing is just it reads the whole conversation, picks the next word, reads the next whole conversation, picks the next word, until it predicts a stop word, basically just says, okay, I'm done. That's enough.
But so its logic is local in the sense that it always only thinks about one next word.
Yeah.
It doesn't think about the context.
No. Although I'll kind of go into that a little bit with reinforcement learning. I think it kind of thinks about more long term after it does some reinforcement learning. But yeah, so before I start, I want to do a quick crash course on machine learning and neural networks. Machine learning is a multidisciplinary field of study focused on finding ways for computers to learn from data. We've seen really, really huge improvements on this in the last 20 years. I think as we kind of talked with Darby, there's been multiple AI features where everyone gets super excited about AI and machine learning, and there's just tons of money gets dumped into it, and then nothing works, and it all crashes to the ground. And then no one's allowed to talk about machine learning for like 10 years, and then it comes back again. And now we're kind of on we're on the third wave of machine learning development, and this time it's actually working. Although I've been seeing stuff online of people are worried there's going to be another winter because ChatGPT isn't as cool as everyone thinks it is. We're not going to be able to do large language. But in this recent success, a lot of it is around neural networks. although really the most important element is we have really, really fast computers and we have tons and tons of data to train models. Neural networks are really powerful, but at least in my opinion, the really important thing is that we have the data and compute power to process. There's a good chance that we'll find some other paradigm that works better than neural networks. I'm going to go through 3 different forms of machine learning quickly. There's kind of 3 main paradigms which we use for training. So we're starting with unsupervised learning, which is where we train a model where we don't have correct answers. So you might do something like if you're Spotify and you want to be able to group people together based on their music listening habits. So you have a model, you give it all these people and all the different songs they listen to, and it'll be able to kind of cluster them together into people who like folk music, people who like punk music, whatever it is. But it won't be that explicit. It's not going to say with a label, this is people who like folk music. They just, on their own in the data, are grouped together because they listen to similar songs. And we don't have to go and say, these people should all be in a group together. It's just kind of looking at the way it works and finding these groups. And then once you have that model, once you have these groups, you could go and, for example, recommend songs that people who are similar to you with. There's a pretty good chance Spotify does do that. The next paradigm is supervised learning, where we do have a correct answer. As an example, if we wanted to detect spam on Twitter or something, we might go and find a whole bunch of tweets, label them as this is spam, this is not spam, and then we could train a neural network or something else to predict, given some text, is that spam or not. So in this case, we have to go and say, label every single item. Something that I kind of didn't really understand when I was first learning is that it's not like, I thought it was kind of stupid. Like, why would you ever use supervised learning when unsupervised learning is right there and you don't have to come up with the labels? But it doesn't really work like that. Like, not all problems can be solved with either method. Sometimes, like, you can kind of only do it, or at least you have to significantly change your approach if you wanted to do it unsupervised. And the last one, more complicated, is reinforcement learning.
Can you just give an example of that?
Of supervised, or
What kind of a problem? You said not all problems can be approached directly.
right, sure.
For example,
Like how you might approach the same problem from each paradigm.
What would be the case where you got supervised or not good supervised? Because you said
where can't
utility,
you use
right?
unsupervised, for example?
I would say that, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say because there's a lot of smart people and they come up with different solutions to things.
Sure.
But like, so the spam detection, I think, is probably a pretty good example. If all you had was a bunch of tweets, it would be really hard to come up with something that can tell spam versus not spam apart. Because, like, at no point do you know where the spam is. Yeah. So you have to go through and say, this one is spam.
The reason why, I mean, if you gave them a bunch of music and say which is one, which is how you spoke, the reason why they know is because you label one.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as like labeling spam.
Oh, well, you mean like with this one here?
Yeah.
With
unsupervised.
unsupervised? Yeah, sorry.
It's the same.
Maybe I wasn't very clear here. So in this system where we're grouping users together based on our listening habits, those groups don't have names. It doesn't actually say this is the people who listen to funk folk music. They're just grouped together in a kind of abstract way that the model came up with. And if you were to go and look, you would probably find that they would be grouped by genre, but that's kind of a result of some more abstract process that the model has gone through. It's still useful, it's still meaningful, and you might be able to combine them. Like, for example, you might do that, come up with these groups, which kind of don't really mean anything on their own. But then you could go and predict. You could go and label a bunch of them as what kind of song is this, and then you could then go and predict the genre of a song based on what group it's a part of. I don't know if that.
It's like stacks.
Yeah, you can stack them on top of one another.
Yeah.
So that you can use this group as an input to another system. but the group in itself can sometimes be hard to interpret what it actually. But that doesn't mean it's not helpful. Like you probably, if you were to, like in our music playlist generation example, you probably do like the song that the other people in your group, even though you can't put a label on who's in what actually kind of joins them together. Does that make sense?
Is that how it figured out what we listen to? So if I had that playlist of songs you listen to when you were younger.
Yeah.
They figured that out because they grouped you with people also what they listen to and to you.
My guess would be it's more like I just looked at how old you are and gave you top music when you were 20.
Yeah, also.
But
that makes more sense.
you could do something similar to that.
But Eric and I had different. So.
Yeah, that could be it. Or maybe they say, for example, they did the same thing. They find what group you're in, and then they look at the music that people in your group listen to that was published in 2004. So I mean, you probably all of it eventually, but regular expressions are pretty powerful. The regular expressions are a kind of program you can use to find bits of text in a longer piece of text. So you wouldn't want to use it. You probably could figure it out. I've seen someone prove that Windows PowerPoint can be used as a programming language, and you can potentially program anything in Windows PowerPoint. So,
Makes no sense.
Like it's like
it's Turing complete.
oh
Yeah.
fuck! I didn't know how to say it.
Paint.
Hmm?
They do weird stuff in paint.
Can you?
I don't know. People do weird stuff.
It's just like with
That's
James
applicable
Bond,
to
people
just
do
the
like
way-
concerts with like old electronic toys. It's disturbing. Impressive.
He told you or did himself?
He told me, and then he showed me videos of doing it. Wow, that's fucking
Yeah.
insane.
like James guy who made like a church organ out of Game Boy Advance that would turn on and you press the button.
That's
Okay, so yeah, so the last or any more questions before I go on? Okay, so the last form is reinforcement learning, which is it's a little different from the other two, so and also more complicated. In this case, you have your model that's going to make a sequence of actions all in a row. Essentially, what we would normally call kind of separate predictions. But we don't know if whether or not each action is correct. All we have is at the end of the sequence of actions, we know how well we perform according to some metric. That could be like if you're making a maze solving AI, it'll tell it how close are you to the center. Or if you're making a robot and you're trying to teach it how to walk, it'll say how far did you manage to walk. And so what's really incredible with this is that we don't actually have to know what the correct answer is at any of these points in the sequence. So like if we're training our walking robot, we don't have to know how to make a robot walk. All we have to do is tell it, this is how far you got this. And the algorithm will figure out strategies that work to make it run further and further and further.
Is this what the guys Boston Dynamics would use?
I
Or do
doubt
they
it. I think they figured it out. Maybe a little bit, but
it seems like this would be useful.
yeah. I mean, people totally do it. There's definitely, at least in like simulation, you see people training walking.
I'm concerned for them.
Yeah.
Send them an email, guys.
To use
Yeah.
I think humans should
These
figure out
guys
first
probably
before
haven't
letting
thought
the
of this yet.
like AI do it, so they know how to undo it.
Yes.
It- kind of on that subject, this is very difficult to do in practice. One of the reasons being that the model has to actually go and try all these different strategies and make mistakes in the real world, or at least in a good enough simulation of the real world. Because like typically what you're doing here, the whole idea is you don't know what the correct answer is. If it's a robot, you don't have a perfect simulation of the real world. So if you were to go, what you would do is try to make as good a possible simulation as it can, And what the robot's going to do is learn to take advantage of all the little errors that you've made. And when you go and put it in a real robot, it's just going to fall over because it's used to being able to like slightly merge its foot into the ground or something. It can
Is
do.
that why self-driving cars?
Yeah, probably one of the reasons.
Is this essentially how the like, YouTube ad and suggestion works?
I have seen reinforcement learning, people talking about reinforcement learning in recommenders. I don't know if YouTube uses it or not. I'm sure they're trying to.
I thought I saw videos somewhere on. I think it's on how they choose which ads to suggest.
Mhm.
And it sounds very familiar.
So like that, I mean, that's a good example. Like we could apply reinforcement learning to YouTube recommendations, like all the videos on the side. You could have your model and it could just try a bunch of different recommendations and it wants you to click through multiple videos, watch more than one video. That's your sequence of actions. Each recommendation is a sequence of action. And then at the end of the sequence, maybe when you finally log off, it's going to say, this is how long they stay on the site. And it's going to keep on doing that, trying different things, trying to extend how long you stay on YouTube. And it'll be able to learn which sequence of videos are best to keep on. And unfortunately, what that system learned is flat Earth, conspiracy theories, anti-vax, like all this kind of bullshit. Andrew Tate. So that's how this thing can go wrong. Same with Facebook. Facebook has learned that giving you posts that make you, and they're probably not willing to turn it off. Yeah, but that's not a reinforcement learning specific thing. All these things. So next, we're going to talk about neural networks. Neural networks are a specific form of machine learning model that is inspired by the way that brains work. This is a drawing of a neural network, and we can see it's built into layers. So this is we call it a 3-layer network. There's an input layer, 3 hidden layers, and an output layer. Each of these circles is called a neuron. So, basically, each of the neurons has a value, a numerical value. If we were doing some kind of text processing, we might have like a number for each character in the word that we're looking at. And then each next layer in the network looks at all the neurons from the previous layer. Each of these lines is what we call a connection or a weight. And what the neuron is going to do is it's going to look at the values of each of these previous neurons. It's going to multiply each one by its own number. So each of these lines has like a multiplier associated with it. That's what we call a parameter or a weight. And it's going to sum all those up and come up with a new value, new output value. And we're just going to do that all the neurons, and they do it again for the next layer, and so they get to the and that's basically it. That's what it's doing. And if you scale this up enough and you give it a big enough data set, you can do a lot of really crazy shit.
Relative.
What else do you want to know?
Like, what would be an example? Of
Yeah, it sounds
this
like
in
you're just talking about like
practice?
you have a value and then it adds something to your value.
Yeah, and so that's the
Simple
problem. So kind of the problem is that, like, especially in this part, none of this means anything. It's just math stuff. The neural network is figured out. So, like, what kind of operations it needs to do to go from, like, I don't know, say you wanted to look at words and figure out what language they're from. You would go and you create your neural network. Each of your neurons, your input neurons, would get a different number based on which character from the word it is. Like if your input was words, WORDS, you would assign a different number to each letter in the alphabet, 0 through 6.
25. Because you're indexing off.
Sure, yeah. And then and then each neuron would, I don't know, do a bit of processing until you get to the output, and your outputs are like English, French, Spanish, and whichever neuron has the biggest value, that's the language of that word. So that would be what we call a classification task. You give it some input, and you come up with one of multiple different categories or classes. And the actual math that happens inside here is totally up to the neural network and the learning algorithm to program.
What percentage of this can be done in PowerPoint?
I haven't looked into that. But if that guy's right and PowerPoint is Turing complete, all of it could be done in PowerPoint. But it would be really, really hard.
How much of it could be done by Eric walking on an infinite beach along a set of instructions? And go forward, back, B,
All
and
of
right.
it. All of it could.
Excellent. I have great work for fisheries.
Once we're replaced.
So maybe a little more here. So about kind of, so this is a neural network model, and parts of it are fixed and parts of it are changeable. So like the number of input neurons, the number of layers, the number of neurons in each layer, the way that they're interconnected, that's called the network architecture. So like the shape of it doesn't change. You kind of lay it out, this is what the shape is going to be, and then you go and train it. The shape will not change during training. The thing that we're learning, the part that we're training, is the weights assigned to each of these numbers. So I should have gotten a different diagram of only one. Like if we look at this one right here, it's got 5 input lines to it. So it's going to take the output value from this neuron, multiply it by whatever weight is associated with this line. We're going to do the same here. This one multiplied by that line, this one multiplied by that line. Then it's going to sum together all those multiplied values, and then usually I'll do it some other function on top of that sum value. The important thing is that what we want to do is figure out all the different weights to make this work for the data set that we're learning on.
And you do that with like an optimization function.
Yeah.
But this is optimizing billion dimension.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's a really big one.
Like
I'm not going to get into the optimization stuff, but I think it's unnecessary. But that is, it's gradient descent. I'm trying to talk about like what do we mean by training, and what are maybe some of the consequences of how we train. So, say for example, we wanted to create our spam detection neural network. So what we do is we get our data set, all of our tweets, labeled as spam or not spam. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the data set. We're going to take a chunk of messages, chunk of tweets, how the network predict are they spam or are they not spam. And then we're going to go through the network and we're going to tweak all those parameters, all those weights on the lines, such that if we were to try this set of messages again, we would do a little bit better on them. We'd get 50% of them correct instead of incorrect. And we're basically just going to do this over and over and over and over again for all the different blocks in our set of the tweets, and we're going to do the whole thing over and over, millions or billions of times. It doesn't necessarily have to be that much, but certainly the ChatGPT can do it billions. And if that works, eventually we're going to have a model that performs reasonably well on all the data in the data. It says spam or not spam correctly. But there are some important consequences of this. So we're calling it our spam detection neural network, but what it really is it's trained for this specific data set. All it can do is spam detection, and really it's only ever learned to do spam detection on your whatever data you give it. So we risk things like what's called overfitting. The neural network could really strictly memorize the contents of your data set. It just knows that, if you just say, show me your bum, show me your bum, show me your bum, show me your bum.
Why is it example?
Sure.
open
For example, say you're on Twitter and there's only one spammer. And all he ever does is say, "Show me your bum" to women. And then a second spammer comes along, and he's saying, "Show me your dick" to men. Our neural network won't be able to detect that because it's never seen someone say, "Show me your dick." It doesn't understand language. It doesn't really understand anything. All it's just seen a wide variety of text, and it can perform well on that text. So what our goal is we want to have a data set that represents a really, really broad variety of things that we want to accomplish. And ideally, you're going to have, the idea is that you're going to have way more individual instances of messages than the model could possibly memorize. So what it has to do is figure out some more real pattern, kind of underlying pattern, and it's going to use that to predict spam. So if it goes and just memorizes the data that you give it, we call it overfitting. And if it doesn't do that, if it goes and hopefully finds some kind of underlying pattern, you say it's generalizing well. And if you have a model that's well generalized, you'll be able to go off and use it for all the different kinds of spam you have on Twitter. Hopefully, when your spammers kind of change tactics, it'll still be able to work well because it hasn't just memorized "show me your bum," and it has a little bit more of an understanding of what spam
Is the trick with large language models then just giving them semi-infinite amount of data, and the actual principle is
principles the same. Probably, yeah, we'll get into that. So, last introductory item is NLP and language models. So, ChatGPT and other GPT models are NLP systems. NLP stands for natural language processing, which is a field where we focus on.
Just by people, can you say the
No. Basically, focus on having computers work with natural language. Natural language meaning languages that people use. So like regular text and speech. So we're a computer programming language probably. And then so we're looking for ways for computers to understand language, also to produce convincing natural. And some applications of this that we already use are things like Google Translate or the grammar checker. So this stuff, definitely already exists. But these GPT models are like really next level stuff. And something, sorry? I don't really know how either of those systems work, but I know that Grammarly is a machine learning system because I see their job on LinkedIn. And they're looking for people who know how to train natural language processing neural networks.
Do you want to start a company?
I'm sure people are already doing that. I wonder if LinkedIn sells it.
Why
They
will,
might.
why will my predictive text never learn that I do not
Probably for that same reason as they don't want their system to predict square words, so they just
You can change that in your settings
Yeah.
typically.
kind of turn off the.
And mine I did. Predicts bad words.
Get it to do different levels?
No,
of-
it was just on or off.
Oh, you
It's
can't
like-
do like drunken sailor mode. Full on.
Every third word is in fact
Yeah, that's
vile.
great.
Can't train it to
Only every third.
No.
Mom.
Yeah.
Declan, Debbie.
Show me a
Looks
bunch
like
of
Okay. Yeah. So some more specific. So one form of natural language processing that we'll be talking about today is text prediction or text completion. So this is what ChatGPT does. Give it a sequence of words and it can predict the next word. Typically, in the past, what people have done to solve this kind of problem is that they might start with a really broad data set, all of Wikipedia or something, but then they usually have some kind of goal. They want to make a model that can answer questions, that can summarize all big block of text, maybe it can solve logic problems described. So they're going to go and train their model for that specific task. But this means that we're going to suffer from those same weaknesses fitting a specific task or a specific data set. Once you've trained it to summarize text, that's basically all it. And these big GPT models have made really big strides in generalization, where they're amazing. So yeah, GPT models. A GPT model, GPT stands for generative. Oh, that's a hard word to say. Pre-training. They're large language models, so they're really, really large neural networks that are trained to do text completion. And they're trained on very large data sets taken from the internet. And there's no specific goal with this data set, just tons of reasonably high quality text from whatever people are posting on the internet about. And that really large quantity and wide variety is the incredible ability.
It's over.
This is their fucking power.
So the first one that kind of really made the news a little bit. I don't think it made regular news, but it made prime news. Was GPT-2. So that was a neural network with 1.5 billion parameters, and made by a company called OpenAI. And OpenAI's goal here was to build a model that can perform well on a variety of different text completion, different text tasks, like summarization or question answering, without being explicitly trained to do so. It was kind of interesting that the data set that they created, it was 40 gigabytes of text that they found by looking through Reddit and finding posts that had more than a few upvotes and following whatever link was in there and taking that article or blog post or whatever and using it as part of it. The idea there is that if it's been posted to Reddit and people are kind of liking it, it's probably not like a 6-word tweet of someone saying something crazy. Probably a reasonably good article or blog.
I guess an average of 3 upvotes.
Yeah, 3 karma.
Yeah.
But only 40 gigs.
Only 40. I mean, text.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a crazy.
That's compressed, I believe, and so
Jesus.
compression is pretty good. And yeah, so the important thing here is that idea that they're looking to train a model that can perform well without being explicitly trained to do so on tasks like some question. There's a bit from the paper, the GPT-2 paper, that I thought was good. So our speculation is that a large language model with sufficient capacity will begin to learn to infer and perform the tasks demonstrated in natural language sequences in order to better predict them, regardless of their method of procurement. If a language model is able to do this, it will be in effect performing unsupervised multitasking. So that's kind of what they're going. And the model worked. It was able to perform well on a variety of different tasks without ever being trained to do so. Kind of what they do is they call few-shot learning, where they would give a couple of examples in the input to the model. So kind of like how we're doing with our chat. So they give a couple of examples of summarizing text, maybe 100 examples, and then it'll give it a final block of text and say, summarize this. So they don't actually have to go and train them all. They don't change any of the parameters, change any of the weights. They just give it examples in context. And this is a pretty huge deal. Other machine learning systems can't really do this. You can't explain things to them through their inputs. And the researchers could see that the model was not actually learning everything it could from this data set. They could see that they can go further, they can get better. So that's what they did with GPT-3, which is a bigger, better GPT-2. It has 175 billion parameters, 100 times larger than GPT-2. It was trained on a much broader data set. They didn't use Reddit this time. They just looked through the whole internet, basically, and kind of curated it down again for reasonable quality text. I don't really know what what they mean by high quality, but I think it's like grammatically correct, not making up too much bullshit.
If
Like,
you look through all of
it's
internet, then it's 90% porn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but how much that's going to show up as text, right?
I
Fair
mean,
enough.
listen.
But I don't think the 90% rule holds for erotica.
Yeah, most of it is shit. You are correct.
So, just a question. In terms of the hardware, I think they're gonna like. What's the scale of that? It's actually
It's
like a
like-
server cluster. Or?
Yeah, it's like I don't know how many, but it's say 8 or 12 top end GPUs, each of them with
Okay.
You have to
100 gigabytes of RAM in each GPU. Really big.
Could we?
So like as an example, so if they're paying market prices, it would have cost them $4.6 million just to train GPT-3 once. So they actually like I read in their paper they say they later found they had made a mistake in joining the data set, but they couldn't do it again. They can't just like spend $4.6 million on compute whenever they want to.
Oh, okay. So $4.6 million. So it's like a large network.
Yeah, it's a big one.
So why does it cost that much money just to train it?
To rent the GPUs from a cloud provider.
So, in terms of like as a finished product, you had. You think it's something you have outside of like a timeshare machine or thing?
No, I mean yeah, you could, but not like it doesn't fit on one. It doesn't fit in memory. We're getting there though. Yeah, probably. So one of the important things about GPT-3 is so GPT-2 could perform reasonably well in a variety of tasks. So like it could do it at all. It's not just making shit up. GPT-3 was significantly better than like most other state-of-the-art models on things like summarization questions. Like an order of magnitude better. Pretty wild. So OpenAI's idea of if we just make it really, really big and show a lot of text was like, this is it. This is also probably the one where they really started making it, right? I saw this one on not just like tech YouTube. And then ChatGPT is like the really big one. So ChatGPT is they took GPT-3 and they fine-tuned it to be good at conversation, as well as to hopefully be like make up less shit and be less racist. So they've released this one of the public as a chatbot, as we saw. Something I learned is pretty wild is that apparently it's the fastest growing consumer product in history. So they've reached 100 million monthly active users in just 2 months. The previous one was TikTok. So it's more popular than TikTok.
So it's in
Yeah.
good company.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not- It's not more popular.
It grew faster than TikTok. Yeah, they probably
Right.
TikTok has probably has more than.
in short
Um,
period.
I'd also guess that it's not going to last. Like I think people are probably going to stop. It just made a bunch of.
You think it's racist because of the text?
Yeah.
Versus like learning.
Wait. What does ChatGPT say? Right.
I don't know. I haven't looked into that much. I think it would probably be more like they're probably good at making it stopping it from saying like explicitly racist things, but it still like displays racial biases in its predictions. Like so as an example, for me,
Yeah.
I never told it that I was straight, but it went and assumed that I was straight and made me a woman. And when I said I want some, give me someone who I wouldn't like, it gave me.
Or it just assume that you can travel to other cities in
Yeah.
seconds. So
Yeah.
If
I mean that one's
in another
and
And
kind
the
of like
finance. And someone who worked in finance. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Like it just picked things people
It's a
didn't like.
business major and
Men
nobody likes
in
that.
other cities who work in finance
Yeah.
with no hobbies. That's a very
Yeah,
targeted
let's go
attack
for
on a very select group of people based off of like just the text of the internet. I think that's fun.
Yeah. Select
That
select
says something
group
about
of
what we
people
write.
like people who live in other cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that says something about what we write. That's funny.
Wait, that's everyone.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finance.
If I had to
No.
read the internet, I'd also hate people.
ChatGPT likes human being chat though.
No,
It doesn't
not
make sense.
no. That's all.
What is
But what do you think about that as an idea that it shows what we're most likely to write? So it shows kind of averaged out, very likely.
Mhm.
it's not especially racist
Yeah.
us, which is racist.
Yeah.
It's
Oh yeah,
racist.
totally. It's
No, like
all
they
these
kinda-
things are
people have tried to
it's
do
a
like
mirror.
question it on comparisons like homicide stats and crime stats in the United States. And it actually dodges a bunch of like very nuanced racist positions quite well. They did a lot of work to make it not be racist. I just want to say this. I follow a lot of racists on my own Twitter. And they're very pissed. They think this is absolutely cucked. And they're like, why won't it talk about these stats? Why won't it talk about this? Why won't it do that?
Whenever Darby's having a bad day, he just goes to see like other racists that I can speak. They're angry, and that makes me feel good.
Yeah, basically. But no, I mean,
Oh,
I just want to say, like, in defense of the people who did the development for this, there are issues with it, but they actually did quite a bit of work, it seems like, to avoid
It means
Racial
trouble.
biases.
it saying some things.
Things like the robot that they made the internet freaking nuts.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
seem to have tried to put
The
some rails
Twitter
on it.
one was just
Yeah.
just
It
kind
was
of
not
free
good, and it was really
freestyle.
quick.
And so like that one was I think I don't know too much about that one. That was I think Microsoft did that one and put it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Probably basically the same thing if you
That was
works the same way, trained the same way. They just gave their own data set and didn't put any limitations.
Since you have here that researchers wanted to make a model that will keep up a dialogue with a person, does that mean that the idea of a Turing test is now moot?
Yeah.
New Turing test is like it's you. It's the old
Well,
joke, but I like it.
it's the we're all living in a simulation thing. Like there's a
No,
bunch-
Ghost in the Shell. It tells you you went under for surgery. You don't know if you actually came up.
Fair enough.
If anyone doesn't know, so the Turing test was something that I assume Alan Turing came up with, saying that if you can talk to a computer and it seems like it's a human, probably it's a sentient computer. And ChatGPT absolutely lost the Turing test. So, a little while, yeah.
It's also not.
They've had 50%. They've had chatbots pass Turing test.
Yeah.
Especially if you kind of lower it a little bit, like say, like, can it convince you it's a 6-year-old or something? We've been able to do that for a long time.
I don't know. I remember we tried. Some chatbot a few years back, and you could relatively quickly get it to a point where it was doing.
Is that
Okay,
Funny,
so the
yeah.
actual
Yeah.
Turing test was if you could convince Alan Turing that it was a person. Okay, it wasn't for like us. It was like if you could convince John von Neumann that this was an actual human being. It's not for like the midline, the far end of that fucking curve.
It's not for-
socially
it's not for
stupid.
idiots like
I know.
No, I mean
It's-
like Igor's a smart person, and the reason why those chatbots probably pass 50%. Say like,
It's for well socialized people like John Newman and Alan Turing.
but no, I was
Who I met
Well,
were
notoriously
super
well
friendly.
socialized,
you know what? Like I'm von Neumann.
Did they?
Yeah.
It's John Boyd Moyer.
He used to drive around reading, he crashed his car a bunch of times.
Oh.
Used to piss off Einstein,
What
playing
is his
music
claim
too
to
loud.
fame?
He discovered a lot of things in computing.
And
Was he
mathematics.
the transistor guy?
No,
Or
but he
those-
did game
no.
theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, the theory of games, economic behavior, did the architecture of computer that we use today, did a lot of stuff in math, he used a bunch of physics, test computing. He's very, very intelligent polymath and good guy. He also did a bunch of stuff that's actually early on for stuff like neural networks, I think, discussion of computers and modeling AI and shit. Very nice set of lectures.
Okay. Yeah, ChatGPT is GPT-3 with some of that fine tuning. So kind of like we were saying before, how we might fine tune for text summarization or something. That's kind of like a more abstract concept that we're fine tuning for carrying out a dialogue and not making up facts. So how do we do that? So what the OpenAI did is they got a group of contractors together. I think it was 40 people, and they had them come up with like a long form conversation text. They pretending to be both sides of the conversation, and they probably spent many hours doing that. I think I've read some reports that they were like criminally underpaid people in the third world.
Or were they criminally underpaid? I'm not saying that's better.
Yeah, so then we take them all and we fine tune it on this data set of conversation. So we're doing that same thing. Next word, did you get the next word correctly? But now instead of being a just general sweep of the internet, it's these conversations on our own. So in OpenAI's literature, they call this is like the supervised step. So the first step where we just grab all the internet, we call that unsupervised. We didn't have someone go and make blocks of text. This is supervised because we don't create these dialogues. And then we do a final reinforcement learning step where it's kind of a little bit complicated, but they basically they have it. So like in our reinforcement learning, we describe it as we make a sequence of actions that at the end we tell it if it did a good job or not. So with this one, it comes up with an answer to your whatever you said in the class of the conversation. And we kind of look at that whole answer and say, that was a good answer or a bad answer. So in that way, so even though the model is thinking one word at a time, it's getting feedback from all the words, 30 words, when it actually goes and tweaks all of it.
Right now, there are these two topics of previously they're paying someone.
Yeah.
Are they using the data we're putting in?
I think that's a big benefit of it, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the big benefits. So I mean, even this, like, I think a lot of this stuff, like the data that they used to create these data sets, came from like GPT-3 was also released to the public. You could play around with it. So they took that stuff, they used it. I didn't go and see when they are released, so I don't know.
I would say months. Like
no, GPT-2 came out years ago.
Yeah.
GPT-3 to go to ChatGPT.
Yeah, months.
Yeah. Yeah, like that. So I was gonna mention this later, but like GPT-2 is one of the reasons that I got into machine learning in the first place. Like quite a few years ago, I watched a YouTube video from a channel called Computer File, where they show how GPT-2 learns to do math by itself. So these guys went and they looked through the data set that it was trained on, and they found equations. They came up with equations that were not listed anywhere in the data set, and just asked GPT-2 to do them, and it could get it most of the time, which is pretty wild. That means that without ever being directed to learn math, all it's ever directed to do is what's the next word. It figured out how to do math just for the sake of being able to get the next word when it is asked to do math. And I was like, holy shit, I need to go learn how all this works. We're all about to like fuck by.
You'd rather be the fuck more than fucking.
Welcome over overboard.
Yeah. It's a really big deal. Yeah, so yeah, they trying to fine tune it for dialogue. Did it work? Yeah, it worked pretty well. We can all see that it's really good at keeping up dialogue. It seems very natural and it can use language very well. It makes up information about only about half as much as GPT-3 did. It says toxic things 25% less the time, but it is not less biased. They didn't manage to make it less racist, less sexist.
So you needed to tell it like 3 times explicitly that what's your name.
Yeah. And then okay.
How do you make the system less sexist or racist? Asking
Mhm.
Maybe you
Yeah,
have like a machine learning
basically-
algorithm
you
to
have just
vet
like
your
put in
data.
exclusively like super.
So probably 2 things. You try to start with less racist data, which they're already doing. And then the other thing is and then in our next step, in our supervised learning step, again, if we don't have anything racist or sexist in there, it should become a little bit less. And then I think one of the big ones was meant to be this last reinforcement learning step, where if the model does come up with something that's racist or sexist, it can say, no, don't do that. Stop doing that. So that's kind of how it got to the point, how Darby found it could even sneak around like complicated murder rate related racist stuff.
Yeah.
Because it does seem to have a good understanding. It can understand language and logic to some degree. And it's also been consistently told to not be racist, so maybe it figured out that it agreed about whatever you guys are saying.
Roughly around. We don't.
So just kind of one last step. This is actually kind of what I wanted to spend most of the time talking about, but I only have 2 slides, so here you go. Just going to talk a little bit about this generalization and the emergent behavior that we these large language models, we saw that OpenAI was their whole goal was to create a model that doesn't have to be trained, just broad way, and that worked really well. And not only did it work well, it really exhibits some emergent behaviors, which I read a little bit of a paper about this, which would be cool. Here's a bunch of graphs, and we can see. So this is a bunch of different tasks, like doing arithmetic, translating text, unscrambling words, answering questions. And then on the x-axis, each of these is like how big is the model, or how big is the data set, or how powerful is it? And the really interesting thing here is that you can see that the models start out at random, at 0% accuracy. And then when they get to a certain level of complexity, they just start to skyrocket up. So it's the same data set, basically the same model architecture, just more complexity. And kind of out of nowhere, it just starts to be able to translate text. It starts to be able to do math correctly. And that's pretty incredible. Like typically what you see with this is that it would start at 0 and then kind of slowly go up, maybe kind of like a logarithmic. Like you normally, when you're training something like this, you can do a small model and kind of see how good it is at your task, and just know that if I make it bigger, it'll do better, and it'll have maybe some kind of predictable shape. Whereas in this case, like 5-10 years ago, when we were working on models back down in this range, we had no way of knowing that we would suddenly be able to get to models that can do math all in there. There's no evidence that it would be able to start doing that, but when we got to that point, all of a sudden we're there.
Yeah. Is there a meaning to, like, why is it always at the same size?
Oh, for the different models?
Sorry? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Because it seems like the critical size of the model is always around 10 to the 22nd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows yet. That's totally true. Like, so another thing that I read that OpenAI found, like when they were designing their architecture for their neural network for GPT-3 specifically, they didn't even really give a shit about what the architecture was. Like they actually designed it so that it would work well on their cluster of GPUs, not so that it would perform well, because they found that it doesn't really matter how they structure it. They just have to make it really, really.
So complexity, just
that nodes, that connections, that mixture of both?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, yeah, basically it's, in the end, it's how many parameters, how many of those weights, how many connections.
So
I guess a little bit more. So, these GPT models do have a specific architecture. It's called the transformer architecture, which I didn't go too into because it's kind of complicated. I don't really get it, and it also, at least in my opinion, isn't that important. All of these things do use the transformer architecture, and they wouldn't be able to do it if they tried something else. But there's a perfectly good chance that in 5 years we're gonna have something. The important element here is how much complexity. And bigger computers and more data, you can model.
Can we expect that if we want to train it to do a different type of task, that the critical size will be, so can we range tasks in terms of but by complexity, in terms of how big of a neural network do you
Yeah, I think that would make sense. I don't think anyone has gone and like discovered any special meaning about 10 to 2. But,
No, but that's what I mean. So
Yeah.
would I don't know, would the picture making ones have a different
yeah, they would
critical
have,
size?
they would have a different.
Or I don't know, AlphaGo.
Yeah, I mean, so that not all tasks are going to exhibit this behavior either, right? So like the one of the amazing things about text, I assume this is why OpenAI focused on it, is that it's an incredibly flexible medium. And it's also a medium that we as humans have made use of in all its various complexities. So there are examples of text being used for every possible thing, whether it be math or writing news articles to communicate information or to describe logical steps and some kind of logical thought. So this model, remember, all it's being trained to do is predict that next word. So we're not training it to do math or to translate text. So if you were to look at its metrics for predicting the next word, it's going to have that normal logarithmic shape to it. It's only when we go and look and assess it for tasks that it's not actually trained to do, where we see this kind of emerge. So like with the image one, I don't know if people have looked for this kind of stuff with the image one, but yeah, like maybe you could say generate an image that shows the answer to 2 + 2, and at some point it's going to go from not being able to do math to being able to do math in order to create an image of the number. And that's this is all I got. Just a little quick. So with this emergent behavior stuff, so these models are only getting bigger and bigger. OpenAI is surely they just got $10 billion from Microsoft. They've can do a lot more of those big training runs. And there's a pretty good chance that they're going to continue, whether it be making these lines go up further and further, or coming up with new emergent behaviors that we're still in that pre-takeoff zone where we can't see it.
Yeah, these lines are interesting because they don't have. They only have 1 or 2 data points on that, like that steep, right?
Yeah,
So it's like there's no trend there. There's just like it shoots up to this point, but is it just or is it what
Yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
Normally you would expect it to be like some kind of sigmoid.
Yeah.
But we don't know where on the sigmoid we are. We go a lot higher.
Yeah.
Like that there's one task where it was consistently below the random line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of the other ones, it was performing as if you're tossing a coin. But that one, it was just fucking up.
Worse than random.
What is that, Declan? No?
Grounded mapping. I can find it.
Where did Persian come from? It's
they
like-
want, they want to know if it can do Persian question answer.
Yeah, and interestingly, with even low parameter complexity, it does pretty well. Even random is 25% accurate on Persian.
It's pretty weird,
Yeah.
right?
Is that maybe just a
I think that's a Q&A thing.
yeah? It's a
The other
20.
Q&A thing also has.
It's a 4-person, like a 4-question, right? It's
Yeah,
it
yeah,
asks it, and here's your 4 answers to choose from, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably.
Probably.
If random's 25%.
Okay, yeah, I'm out of stuff.
Is there a reason why the text generating AI is kind of right now separated from the picture generator? There's like nothing really combine them together.
Yeah. So there people are working on that kind of stuff. I guess you have to describe it as some kind of task at the end of the day, right? The text generating one predicts the next word. The image generating ones often will use these GPT style models to understand the text that you give it, the instructions that you give it. But it's not in any kind of, they don't understand it in any way that we could interpret or understand. It produces like basically what they do is they'll cut the network off like right here and just take this part and feed it into a different we do that kind of thing at work all the time. So and then people are also work on, they call it multimodal or multi-domain networks, where maybe they'll have one input slot for an image, another input slot for text, and they'll be able to make it so that they can, this time we're going to put in an image and we'll have no text. So like say, maybe for example, say it's like a summarization model. And so, we want to be able to either summarize the contents of the image or a block of text. And it'll have both inputs, they both feed into one block. But you always have to, you have to have a task and a data set to work. So,
Can you make something that recognizes what kind of a task you want it to do and then channels it into a different?
Well, what would your data set?
Sorry. Yeah, you could do that. There's stuff like they call that mixture of experts often. So they'll have one model that knows which model to use. So like it reads the text and it figures out, okay, this is probably a question. Or maybe sometimes what you do is you just give it to all of the different models that you have, and then kind of give them all different weights, average them together.
So like if you ask ChatGPT to do an integral, and then it says, oh wait, what I actually want to be doing here is asking Wolfram Alpha. What I want to, or paint me a picture of something. Oh, then I'm gonna use this one. Or based on a question, just decide what kind of a task.
So that's kind of funny that you brought that up. So I read a paper last week from Facebook they call it Tool Former. They took something similar to GPT. It wasn't one of the OpenAI's, a much smaller one, and they taught it to use tools. So like they gave it a calculator and like a Wikipedia search engine, a couple of different things, and they showed it how it could inject a call to the tool into the text it was outputting, and then they would go and run it and then put it back in the text and let it continue feeding. And they did it in such a way where it figured out on its own where it could inject these tool invocations, and it did a good job. So like they went off and tested it for math, for question answering, and different things, and it would use the appropriate tool in the appropriate location to answer the question.
Okay, so then you need to tell it that some people are developing tools which are attack dog robots. These people are developing weapons, and these people are angry at AIs, and then it will go, I need tool A combined with tool B to get rid of those idiots which are against me. Okay, excellent.
Okay.
Good.
Can it make itself better? Like, The work
Make a
that the
machine
guy's
learning
doing to build this, could you set it on that?
Can it program?
Can
It
it
can
program?
program.
Because it sounds like
definitely,
Jaden's
very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but-
Shockingly well. ChatGPT doesn't have any desires. It doesn't particularly want to get better. It doesn't have any. It doesn't have any sense of self-preservation. All it wants to do is predict the next word correctly.
But if you tell it that it won't be able to predict the next word correctly, will it?
I don't know.
Is ChatGPT just the Chinese version?
Is it just?
It is. It just has a rule book that it's developed. It's very intuitive for what the answer should be to whatever you're in.
I don't know.
I think it's literally just a metaphor. I think like just maybe.
Aren't we that thing?
Right.
See, that's the question, but we tend to say no.
Yes, because we're scared of the truth.
No,
I
but
just think it's just a very intuitive model of responding to stimulus.
But I guess my question with can it program is, well, okay, let's get into that class of questions. How long before this thing takes your job?
My
So yeah.
It's ready.
I obviously don't really have I don't have strong answers to these things. We don't really know what's going to happen. But what I think is going to happen in my job, I don't actually spend that much time programming. It's about writing code. It's mostly about figuring out what the product designers want and like working out, okay, how should we approach this? What's the correct way of doing it?
Okay, but that doesn't
for the long
seem
term.
like outside the
Yeah, that's
realm
true.
of
It's-
possibility
yeah.
for this.
You could just put in like, especially now that it has this conversational thing, you could say, these are my requirements for the product, and then it could probably figure out if your requirements aren't good enough and go back and forth with details and eventually come up with code.
I mean,
Um,
Molly fed her CV into ChatGPT
Yeah.
today and asked for suggestions, and it came up with fairly
Pretty good
sensible
suggestions.
list of make these corrections, and her
Mhm.
CV will fit.
What was it? What was the
No, it's like you need to put more details in your work experience and what type of projects you work on instead of just talking empty. And I was like, oh,
Brilliant. I would have thought
And
that.
like,
I'm
oh,
for
these and
this.
these things may not be relevant to the type of jobs you're applying for.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like saying like, don't talk about the charity project you're doing, like nothing to do with your environmental science work. But, oh.
That's true. This depends on the employees.
But it's sensible way to.
But yeah, it's about
Personally, I think that's going to be more like it's going to make all of our jobs a lot easier. Probably still going to have jobs. And then, which means that we won't need as many people to do it,
Yeah.
and we'll start to lose.
No, but so to Kate's comment, I read an article by some guy who I think he does some kind of finance reporting or something like that, who said, yeah, I essentially spent 15 minutes, fed the parameters into ChatGPT, and it spit out an article that after a little bit of corrections and editing, I got $600. And I was like, this is something that would have taken me, a good amount of time to research and write, and this little shit did it in a few minutes. So he was like, yeah, fuck it, I'm out of the job.
Wonderful.
okay.
Maybe your journalism wasn't that good to begin with.
Maybe.
If you didn't actually have to call anyone and were just
Yeah,
spinning
but
shit
like-
off the
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
The government already puts out press releases, and then people just write an article of press releases. So think about how many. Yeah, so how many journalists? This is the power loom for comm majors too, right? How much ad copy you can generate with this much faster without anyone like having bullshit delays. Generate ad copy very quickly now.
Mhm.
It's gonna be fucking awful.
But
I
can
mean,
the
it can't go take, do a in-depth research on
Like
Also
actual
cheap.
stories.
but,
Yeah.
so you can do your big stuff. I think that there is something that's intuitive, and that's like if we were to ask ChatGPT, yeah, to write a piece on who's would it be able to latch on? And what about what's happened actually fits into the social site?
I don't know. Probably not. I think what's actually
Just give it some
what's really
time.
important here is not to give it some time, or it really it's about like. I think what's really amazing here is there's the level of complexity that is being demonstrated by this thing, and so I think what we really need to ask is your question about will it be able to latch on the public, what the public's opinion on this is, and what I should say is that more complex than what it's doing now. I personally, I don't think it is. If especially if for example it could go and get some kind of reasonably representative opinion in text of what different people think. It could probably kind of summarize it and get an idea of what people want.
Give it free reign on social media, and it will catch on to at least what the vocal part of society.
And maybe that's what the big question is.
And then you make an app, you give people play credits, and you ask them
Ask
questions
Kate
about
to
popular
tell you what
things
to
in
do.
ethics. Then you harvest that data.
There's at the moment there's one limitation that it has, and it's like they can't improve it. They have to retrain it from scratch.
You want to say it here?
So the point is that it is trained based on data that is stayed. Okay, so
Right.
it's like maybe 2 years old, the data. So if you want to say anything about recent trends, you can't. You need to just find them and feed it to it so that it has access to your text and then does that. So until they figure out how to
I thought
how to
Bing was
incrementally.
I thought Bing was doing
Bing
that.
Chat does that. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
Bing
run
Chat
they
has
run
live
they run a search and then they give it to ChatGPT and it's summarized.
Yeah, the thing is, Bing is summarizing one piece of text. It can't summarize the whole internet.
No.
It can't say in the past week the internet is moving into this direction because they need to retrain it.
But I think it's totally within reasonable to say that it could summarize the top 20 articles that you get out of a Bing search.
Yes.
And maybe a bunch of tweets.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, but
maybe I think right
if you
now
ask
it doesn't have the capacity
what
for
it
that
thought
now.
about a certain current issue, it would find the relevant websites and it would give you a very good summary of the.
Yes.
Like when I want to come up with an opinion of something, I don't read 20 articles. I read maybe one or two. So
And I
you can read
think
a lot more than me.
the concern would be this is not that it would just more or freak out the public who's going
ChatGPT optimization. So that you can do like some sort of gray zone warfare bullshit where you like create a bunch of fake information to like tilt these media narratives in particular directions.
Yes, you
Oh.
could do that.
You can reinforce.
I mean, it's a lot harder to do that than just pay off some journalists.
Well, it's harder to actually sort out that that's happening. Require a lot of expert knowledge, diagnostic, fucking around, and then when people talk about it, relying exclusively on very, very specialized experts who might not be. So
Wait,
you
which
could,
way is this? Is this the
oh, I'm saying you have those problems, yeah, where you start steering it, that kind of stuff.
If you
Assuming
tell
that's
people
possible.
we bought off some people, they say, yeah, that sounds legit. But if you tell them this
It's
is
easier
a
to
very
demonstrate,
highly
yeah.
sophisticated and complicated algorithm that we change a little bit in this way and that way, then it's, I don't understand that.
yeah, I don't.
It gives more plausible deniability to attack. So Kate,
I mean, maybe the role of my profession forward for a select few of us would be to try to not just follow them all, but to give. But then that's giving a lot to decide what is valuable.
Do you know like how you sometimes buy fabric that's made by hand by some weird lady who lives in a hut?
Yeah.
That's the future. It's called art.
All
So-
will be hard.
We
Oh, that's
we're
not
not
yeah.
artisanal journalism.
Yeah, no, it'll
We
just be
kind
a
of already-
pitch thing they give you kind of different.
I love
Connect
how this
with your,
conversation again in
history.
20 years.
How we did.
I don't think it'll be nice.
No.
No, so one thing that I don't know, thinking whether it applies to journalism as well or things like that. But like science publications have been, or journals have been a bit up in arms since. And one of the things was, well, A, is it okay to use this thing to write your paper that you want to publish? B,
No, probably not.
yeah, well, the different journals slightly disagree.
Oh, really?
But B is if you do that, is it okay to list it as an author of a site?
Like author, like chat,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Apparently not if you want to trademark it.
People have been doing that, and most science journals said that you can't
You're
list it
ending
as an author because it cannot take responsibility